Welcome back, everybody. Bradley here again. I'd like to give you guys all a big shout out for all the feedback and the comments on the last videos that I've been doing. Hopefully they're not too boring for you or too lengthy. I'm kind of working on speeding up the process on the time so you guys won't have to be watching them forever. But hopefully there'll be some great information for you guys, and I appreciate it and love all the feedback you guys are giving. So a couple of the comments I've been getting that we'll talk about and I'll cover in this video is the type of blades that I use for cutting. And then we're also going to talk about how I cut out the flames. People have been having a lot of questions about how to cut the radiuses and how to make the flames look so sharp and crisp. And then the other one also is people are talking about the window trim. So I'll kind of go over how I do the window trim and how we cut it to make it look nice. So first and foremost, before we show anything, there's no special tools. There's no certain ways, a magical way to cut it. Most of this stuff is done just by practice and trial and error. Some people are going to pick it up real easy. Some people are going to struggle with it. It's not an easy thing to do because you have to have both good eyes and also a steady hand to work together to make the design come through to you. So I always tell people, if you're first starting out using liquid mask or you want to start doing more creative designs and stuff, start out rather simple. The design we're going to do here today is complex, and it's probably one of the harder ones to do for a flame paint job, but I'll show you how I do it. But what you want to do is start out maybe with a different type of flame, something where it's not as long and there's not as many spikes that are on it. Also, when we're doing it, the way we're going to cut these flames out is going to have a really thin, tight, parallel line through around all the flames. That's difficult to do because you have so many lines, you've got different areas that you're cutting on, so it's not very easy. Start out something simpler. Hopefully you can see this in the light. I've kind of got more light from underneath than above. But start out something where your divider lines aren't necessarily have to be parallel and perfect all the time. This particular design, you can see it's got more swoops towards the end, a little bit fatter and thicker, and they're also broader. So your room for error, it's more forgiving. It's a lot easier to pull something like this off. Until you get the hang of the blade and the eyes adjusting to it to get it what you want, start out with something that's a little bit simpler where the lines are more forgiving on it. Flame jobs are really cool. They look awesome. They look awesome if you can pull them off and make them look good. The problem being is if you don't pull them off good, it makes it look really bad. And a lot of times for people that are trying, their heart's in the right place, but when they can't put it down onto the body, it gets kind of discouraging. So keep that in mind as you're going through it. It's a lot of trial and error. You know, you kind of learn as you go. Some do's and don'ts until you get the repetition of cutting, maybe trying different blades or different methods as you're cutting to what works best for you. So keep that in mind on any design. A lot of times I always tell people to keep it simple. When you first start out, you're going to learn and you're going to develop, and you're not going to be discouraged as you're doing it. So I've already got the body drawn out. This is a Proline Axis body. I thought it'd be a good one to do because it's 10th scale. It's got a few flat spots. It does have some difficult spots on it. You can tell kind of on the sides it has the ridge that's built up where you were going to have to cut through that. And just a few smaller areas like kind of back by the bed where it may wrap around on it. When you look at your design, the things that you're going to notice is some areas that you may struggle with. Like I mentioned, some of the radius areas and tight spots. The other thing too also is in your design, and I highlighted this one here in red. I'll hold it up so you can see it. When we're cutting that second line, those lines are going to be pretty much close to touching. So we're going to kind of deviate from that as we get up there. I kind of put a red dot, so kind of as a reminder when I'm cutting that, I'll know that there's something there I need to change. So we'll leave that in there also. This particular body, we're going to have a color in the front, which is the flame color. We're going to have a color behind it. And we're going to have a divider color, which is what we're going to be cutting out. I'm going to show you. We'll probably obviously do some shading or some paint splats or some different schemes and colors along the way in order to fill it on in. But it'll be a cool looking body. So that's the body we're going to be using. What I want to show you first, and I've talked to a lot of people about it, and a lot of people have different ideas. If you're using and you've been cutting for a while and been painting for a while, keep using the blade that you're comfortable with. One thing I always try to people to do is suggest is just kind of step out of your comfort zone. There's a lot of different blades out there. I've used the ones that have the rotating nylon or Teflon swivels in the end. Honestly, for myself, I haven't found them to be that effective for what we're doing. Maybe some different applications, not RC related, but for me, they still don't swivel enough, and they don't really give you the the flow that everybody's struggling to get with the normal blades that we use. So I mean, if you want to give them a try them, that's fine. I don't expect too much out of them. Let's just say. So the blades that I use, I've been using it for many, many years, and I swear by them, is a number 16 blade. Okay, a lot of people that I've tried to try them, they'll start out with them. Yeah, they're not for me. I can't do it. A lot of people get them and say, man, how have I been able to cut anything without these? So some really like them, some don't. It's whatever you prefer. I've seen many of great designs done with a number 11 blade, which is your standard X-Acto blade. For me, I don't feel as in control. I think you might be able to get maybe a little bit tighter with some of the lines on the very detailed stuff. But honestly, and I'll show you as we go through the demonstration of why I've stuck with a 16 blade, and I'll use it pretty much every time that I have it. I do use the 11s and some of the bodies where I mentioned to where we've got these radius areas where we've got to get up into. Sometimes you can reach it a lot easier with a number 11 blade to get up in there and make that cut. So I do use them. About 95% of the time I use the standard number 16 blade. Get a 5-pack at Hobby Lobby. They're like $6 or $7. They'll last you a long time. Give them a shot and try them. Give them time. You know, I think that especially if you do like a lot of long lines like I do and tighter areas, you're going to find that they're going to be pretty steady for you. So the reason why I use these blades, and I'll use my shorty handle here, they're both the same blades, is when you're cutting in the bodies, a lot of times if you have a big handle, I'll show you the bigger handle one, some of these areas it's hard to get in there because you have the back part of the body in the way. So you can't really get in there to kind of make the cuts that you want. So I had someone make me in, we've got a short stubby handle with a serrated on it, so it's got a good grip to it, to where you can put it kind of like in the palm of your hand and reach on into those tighter spots so you can cover a lot tighter areas with it, okay? That's for the number 16 blade. What you'll find out, and I'll kind of demonstrate as we're going, is when you're using the number 16 blade, when you're cutting, people say, how do you get the line so parallel? What helps a lot is we're going to cut out just the first line, and then we're going to go back and we're going to blind cut that second parallel line, okay? When you're using a 16 blade, if you look at the angle that you're cutting on, so this is the line that we're going to cut in our liquid mask on the inside of the body. When you're cutting it, what I'm doing is I'm looking at the back part of that blade that's coming through. So this very end point right here, I'm keeping my eye on it. So when I'm cutting, I can see right away where my line is going to be cut because it's running right parallel, right along that line as I drag it back. You can kind of see there how you do it. And what it's going to do, it gives you this angle that's not as steep as the number 11 blade that I get ready to show you. So you can basically line and visualize that back part of the blade, the first part that's coming through, and line it up with that line, and it's going to cut at the tip, but you can get that line almost perfectly parallel as you cut it, okay? This is the one big thing that helps. Here's a number 11 blade, okay? Now everybody that's used one of these, they're kind of a common blade. When you're cutting, if you're cutting on the tip of it, this blade is wanting to walk on you and move on you as you're cutting it. And we've all learned the best way to get that line to stop doing that is you tilt that handle back, okay? You can do the same thing with this blade, but look what you're going to have to do. The tip is what's cutting. If you're going to look to make it parallel, and you're going to use the back part of the blade like I demonstrated on the other one, when you drag this, you can do it, okay? That's what you're going to have to do to kind of keep that hand steady and that blade from not wanting to skate on you, okay? Here's the big difference. Look at the angle that I'm using on the 16 blade, and look at the angle that you're using on the number 11 blade, okay? I can guarantee you when you're using this number 11 blade, you are not going to be able to get that blade back there angled to keep it steadier for you from walking. You're going to hit the back side of the body, okay? That's why I like these blades, is because for one, it's a lot shorter, and you don't have to tilt that handle way back to get that flat line on it. So that's why I use these blades. Give it a try. It may feel really awkward to begin with, but I think if you give it time and you kind of look, try it in those tighter spots in the body, it's going to work out a lot easier for you. So some guys, like I said, do awesome, incredible job with the 11s. If you're one of them, hats off to you. Stick with them and don't bother changing. So I wanted to show you that on the blade so you'll kind of get an idea on it. What we're going to move on to now is the flames themselves, how we actually cut them. Okay, and I think what a lot of people have trouble with is they don't understand kind of like how to use the template. Okay, and what people do is they'll try to take their cut and they'll put it directly over the Sharpie because we put the Sharpie marker on there, right? That's telling us where we need to cut. Very rarely do I cut exactly on the black Sharpie marker. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll start maybe off to the one side and then I'll go onto the line until I get to an area where it's going to be a tight turn, and then I may change that and deviate just slightly so it's going to give me a better visual where I can see it and it's not hiding underneath the Sharpie marker. Okay, I see a lot of people that will post pictures of bodies, and I question them, ask them all the time. Their body's totally painted, but they've still got the Sharpie marker on the outside. I'm like, well, how do you know where your cut started and where it ended and how those cuts joined, and you know, how are you seeing through the Sharpie? Well, the answer is they're not. Okay, so they're kind of using guesswork to where those points come to an end, or where if they do have to stop in the middle of a radius where they pick off from and move on. So one rule of thumb that I always do is when I'm done cutting out the single line, before I go back and I blind cut that parallel line, I'll take the isopropyl alcohol and I'll delete all the markers on the outside of the body. What most people say, and it does make sense, is the reason why they leave the Sharpie on there is they forget what the design looked like, or they forgot exactly where the lines were at, so they kind of use that as a guide to flip it over and pull the next color. So I get that. If you have to do it and it works for you, by all means, keep doing it. I think you're going to find out, as far as the cutting side of it goes, you're going to get a lot better cut when you see exactly where the other cut left off at. Right now, when it's hidden underneath the Sharpie, we're just kind of guessing. I don't do it, and I don't think anybody can do it, where you're going to start at one point and you're going to go all the way around all that flame without lifting your blade. Okay? It's basically impossible. I don't care how good you are, you can't do it. So you are, at times, you're going to have to stop the blade, pick it on up, rotate the body in your hand, and move it to where you can get that knife blade back into that cut line you left off from. That's a difficult part. So what you're going to want to do is you'll have to get the feel of when you do lift that blade off of the cut, that you can get it right back in the same spot and carry on. It takes time. It takes practice. You're probably going to mess up more than what you're going to get right off the bat. So don't be discouraged if that happens. What I'll show you, though, is when you do have to lift that blade off, we're going to have you lift that blade off in an area that's going to be a lot easier for you to try to find where to get that blade back in the cut. And it's going to be not as conspicuous to where you can see where it's at on the body when you're doing it. So we'll run across some of those areas on this body here, and I'll show you as we get there. I'm going to kind of have to hold this up also to hopefully kind of get a tighter shot so you guys can see what I'm talking about as we go. And at the very end, I'll cut and we'll remove some window mask also to kind of show you how I do it. The ways that I cut these bodies is the same exact way that I use on all of them. It doesn't matter if it's a drip or if it's a spike or whatever the design may be. I use this same type of cutting method on any one of the bodies, okay? We'll start out by doing some of the flames, and I'll do a side and a top for you. A couple things we talked about is, one is I never cut right directly onto the black Sharpie line. I'll always deviate from one side or the other. It's not saying you can't stay on that line, and I will stay on it periodically as we cut this out. The other thing that you want to do too is, when you're starting, don't start right at the very end of that, okay? These are basically just guidelines. So when you're making these lines, go over it just a hair to where when you flip it over and we're cutting, you can see exactly where you left off or where you started with that flame, okay? What happens is if you start back in the black and we do our first cut and we're going to do the second cut to mate up to it, we're either going to have to erase that part off of the body so you can see where that cut starts out to where you can get right back in it. So I always start just slightly above it. You can also start slightly off to the side and create those lines as you go. But start in an area that you can see it without having to erase the Sharpie marker. Whenever you have to lift your blade off of the cut line, do the same thing. Don't lift it right in the black area, because now you're going to have to go back and erase that black to see where you left off. When you're pulling that line through, what you're going to want to do is stop and drag it just slightly off to the side, okay? So that way when you go back and we're looking at it, all you can see right there is off to the side in the clear part where you can carry on with the rest of your cuts through it. So keep in mind that the Sharpie is only a guideline to it. A lot of times on the flames, what I like to do also is drag these flames way back. You can start back here even further if you want. I mean, you can bring them all the way back as far as you want, because you're just going to take and you're going to lengthen the tail of that flame. A lot of times it makes cool. It makes it more flowy, or you know, it adds a little more character to it. So you don't necessarily have to start exactly on that line where you started at. Like I said, quite often I drag them back and kind of draw those lines out as well. So the body's very flexible. You'll find out as I'm doing it. I'll bow these bodies a lot. I'll push them, I'll hold them, I'll push them against my chest, kind of like that, to get these to flare out to where you can cut into them. Don't hesitate to do that. They're not going to get damaged. They're going to go through more beating on the track. So we'll start cutting this out. And what I've done is, the Proline bodies are really great. They've got really great indentations on there to show you where the trim lines are at. And I kind of put a little red Sharpie on that to kind of show you as we're cutting it, that anything below that line, it's not going to be effective because it's going to be cut off. But I'll usually start my cuts way below that line just to meet up to it. So what I typically do is I'll start on one side, and then I'll kind of work my way to the roof, and then work my way on over to the other side of the body. Windows you can do first or you can do last. It doesn't matter. The other thing too is, people ask, I cut all the design out first before any paint goes on it. So when I take the body and I go down to the paint booth, everything is cut, and I've also got the first color of liquid mask pulled off that I'm going to paint. Okay. On that topic, the first color that I always paint is the thinnest and smallest lines. Okay. People say, well, why do you do that? You can't do that because you have to go, the darkest colors first into the lightest, and my thinnest line is going to be white, so I can't do that. With water-based paints, if you paint them correctly and you apply them and dry them correctly, you can put any color at any time that you want. A couple of bodies that I paint that are really popular, these lines that we're cutting now, they're done in white. Okay, the lightest color you can get. The next color I'll follow it up with is a pink. Okay, you would think, and common would say, hey, this is going to bleed through, and it's not going to make that look right. The white next to the pink, it's going to bleed through, and you're not going to get a sharp line. You can take and cut it and paint it any color you want. If it's a white, like I mentioned, you can back that with a black, and no color is going to bleed through it. So I always cut and pull off the thinnest lines first. Everything is cut out of the body before I go down into the booth. If not, and you're starting to go back, now you've got, if you're just going to pull off one area first and go back and try to cut it, what's going to happen is you've got paint, you've already got it covered up. So you're not going to be able to see exactly where your lines are going to be at, because you're having to look through the paint. And then if you get to the second coat's done, now you're going to go back to the third and you're trying to cut even more, you're not going to see those lines at all. So cut everything out first. Make sure you got everything pulled off that you're going to paint first, and you're going to be good to go. Don't make it difficult on yourself. So we'll start to cut here, and I'll try to lean over to where I can cut, and you'll still be able to see. I'll hold it up at times so you can see also. What I always do is, when I'm doing flames, is I always start at the point first. Some people tried it to where you'll start at the back and you'll drag your flames up through the other way. You can do it, but your chances of hitting it perfect is a lot harder to do it that way. So I always start at the tip of the flames, and what I'll do is I'll start it, and we'll just do one nice flowy line. And what you can do is, when you have it in your hand, use this to twist it. You're kind of going to maneuver this however you want. Take it, move it. It's got a serrated handle on it, which makes it really nice, and you can make it flow really good for you. Same thing as when you're going over the bumps or the curves that are in it. You're going to kind of need to move and rock and tilt your hand as you go to make it stick on that body and make that contour that you're going to want to find for it. So a couple ways you can do it, and what I'll do is, when I get in the habit of doing the right side of this flame, okay, you can start here and you can go back and do the left side. What I like to do a lot of times is I'll go to the next flame, because I'm already in the habit of doing it right-handed. I'll start and I'll do the next cut. So I'll drag it right on through and let it flow, and kind of twist it with your hand. Now, where people get in trouble is when they stop at the very end right here. I haven't lifted the blade. Don't stop in the middle of the cut. What you're going to want to do is let that cut go rocking all the way through that turn. So you're going to need to swivel probably the body and your hand. You're going to want to make it flow all the way through that, and I'll show you. Take it, just twist it, and let it rotate right on through. Okay? So we've completed that. What we can do now is I can see exactly where I left off with that cut. It's not in the middle. It's at the end of that radius where it's a straight point, and now it's a lot easier to stick your blade right back in the end of that cut. So now I'll start out with the end of the other flame, and I'll put it right in the top. You can see how I've taken and I've gone beyond that cut. So now I can see exactly where I started my cut. If I started that back in the black area here, you'd never been able to see that without racing the Sharpie marker. So I'll start right back at the end of that cut, and I'll drag it, and I'll meet it right into that area where I lifted off. I can see the cut. So right there is where I joined up to it. Let me erase that little area, and I'll show you what it looks like. Just use a little paper towel with a Sharpie. Will come right off. And here's what it looks like. Hopefully you can see it. I'll kind of get a look here also. You can see to where you don't have any gaps. You can kind of see how this radius turned out really nice with it. And what it does is because I lifted off way back here. So that radius area looks like it never even stopped. You're a lot easier when you're dragging that blade back to get it and join up to that line here instead of starting here and stopping halfway and coming back the other way and trying to spin it back the opposite way to match up it. That's how your lines look like they never even lifted when you're doing around the radiuses. I'll do a few more here to kind of show you also. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. A lot of the areas, they do get tighter and harder to get into, but you use the same method on each side of it. So I'll draw the other one back through. We'll start and we'll go just past the tip of it, and we'll kind of like let it radius. And the nice thing too with the 16 blades, see, you can stand it right on its nose and turn it right on around. I left this one here just on the inside of that line. Hopefully you can see it there where I left off. And then I'll come back and I'll draw the other line right back into it. You have to have a steady hand when doing it, and none of it's easy. But you can kind of see also how I'd mentioned where you can bow the bodies. I'll take it and I'll bow it back. If not, you're trying to look through it kind of this way. Bow that thing way back and out of the way. Okay, it's going to help you out visual. We'll carry the next top one on over. And what I'll do is on this one, I'll stop short. So I've stopped back here on it. I haven't even started to make the radius yet. Okay, so that way when I pull back through, I'm going to spin around without even lifting, and I'm going to join it right back into that cut line right there. Start at the very top. And as we go and we get there, we're not even lifting. We're just standing the blade right on its nose. And we're going to come right on back, and we're going to join it right on in. Now, I'll erase the Sharpie here, and I'll show you again what it looks like. So you're going to have to lift. You're never going to be able to go around that whole entire flame without lifting the blade off it. You'll break your wrist. You can't do it. But here's what I'll show you, and this will make sense to you. If you look at these cuts that are on here, hopefully, yeah, there we go, we can see them. You can tell, always lift off either before the cut or after the cut, because you can join into it, coming into it with a straight line. Okay, if you lift in the middle of it, it's so much harder to get those radiuses to match up like you want. So I'll keep going, and we'll cut a few more here. Hopefully that makes sense to you. And also the thing too is I've been using this real stubby handle. It's really good to get in a lot of the tight areas to maneuver it around. The thing that's nice too is you can, with the way that I'm showing you how to do it, where you always start further out than what your Sharpie marker shows, you can basically stop and start whenever you want to, wherever you want to, because you're going to see where you left off. Okay, here's another example perfectly. You'll see when I cut through, I just overshot that turn on purpose. It's not hidden in the Sharpie, so when I come back and bring my flame back from this side, you're going to see that it's going to be able to join right up in there a lot easier. Hopefully that makes sense to you. You guys can catch it and see it. So we'll join in back at the top where we know where we left off. Just nice and let it flow. And the thing is you can spin the X-Acto blade in your hand and it'll follow right with you. One thing I did too on this one, I'll show you, is I purposely missed the cut, and I'll show you what it's going to do. By doing it that way, even when we didn't, now if you do it in the radius area, you're going to notice it. But here's what you can do. I purposely overshot this turn where you can see where it cut different. Maybe hold a little bit higher here. Right there you can see. The thing is when we go back to cut that second line, that's going to be hidden in the paint. You're not going to see that. So even if you don't hit that perfect, where you've overlapped and overshot it, it's going to be into a paint area. Hopefully that makes sense and you guys can see that as well. Okay. You do this on all the cuts throughout the whole body. What I'll do is I'll kind of speed up here and do some more cuts. Just starting on the outside of those lines. And like I said, you don't have to follow the black lines as you go through. The ones that are tricky are on the edge. You can kind of see how the body rolls up on that little fender flare there. So start out with your body angle like this where you're going to rotate it. And as you get to that bump, just kind of rotate the body. And you're not even lifting the blade off the body. And you're just letting it lightly drag through there. The more freehand you can do this and the more maneuvering you can do with the body, it's going to help you a lot because you're not going to have to lift that blade up off the top of the body. Cut some more right here for you and show you. And like I said, try to make as much of the radius as you can. If not, you're going to leave a spot where you're going to see where you can go right back into it. The hardest part is when you lift the blade off and you're trying to fit it back in there. But when you're not over that black line, you can see exactly where you left off at and you can join into it. You do enough of them, you get to the point to where you can pretty much lift off wherever you want to, because it's so much easier. And if you've got good eyes, you can fit it right back into the spot where you lifted the blade off of it. You see, we're kind of coming to a little tight area. Now here's an area where you can use an 11 blade, kind of see where we've got to the end of it. So you can come back in, continue that line on around it. And then we'll switch back over to the other blade and join up to it. When you get to these little tight spots, you got to kind of like let the blade do its thing and fall down in that groove. And come right back up around it. And we can see right where the cut left off. Okay, let me erase some of that now and we'll show you. There you go. So that's going to be the first part of the cut. So we're going to do that on the whole body. Let me show you this part on the top that I had mentioned. If you do accidentally wipe some of your Sharpie off or you smear it with your finger, we can go back and we'll just touch it up. We'll just kind of draw that flame in there how it should have been. We'll start and we'll do some top parts and I'll show you. When we're going to double that line, when we go to the inside of that, chances are these are going to be pretty close to the same size. So it may even shut off that flame there. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I can see color go through all of that. When I get to this red area, I'm going to purposely deviate from that line. I'm going to go slightly wider, just down a little bit on each side. So it's going to open up to where when I go through to cut that second line, it's not going to clamp it off. So I'll start out with the tail here. We'll just kind of, when you get to the rocky part in the back, just kind of like let the knife do its thing. Now I'm going to deviate just slightly from the line there. Kind of see how I did that. And you can also rotate the blade, or you can also move the body if you have to. Let it rotate right on around for you. When you get in areas that's a little bit more tighter and when you're running uphill, spin the body around to the opposite side. Find that line where you left off at. Drop your blade right back in it and continue on up that way. and overshoot the cut. Don't stop at the very end. What we can do is you can also do this too if you want. Just do the radius part. Like we'll rotate right on around. Like that. And then we can start right where we left off and draw right on back. Because now we're going to be going uphill at this very end part. I'm going to join right in. Also, when you're cutting backwards like that, the thing is, you don't want to have, when you have a point, here's our point where we left off. When you have your other point come in and join it, you don't want to overshoot that turn. Most times you're going to see people with a flame, a lot of times if they can't see it or they can't cut it close, you're going to see this X at the end, okay? What you want to do is take that line and draw it right back on up to where it's going to meet right where you left off with the other one. Just like that. You're going to have a lot cleaner cut by doing that. Okay. I'll cut the opposite side now. And I'm kind of doing this out of order. Usually I'll start kind of like reading a book and I'll start on one side and kind of not go to the other side until the one's already done. So that way you don't forget where you left off at. I'm just kind of like doing it now to show you the video to kind of give a demonstration on how we're going to cut that second line on the inside of it. And what you can do is like, you can see where I'll show you here. I kind of changed the look of this one here. I didn't want to get it so far down because I'm going to have a second line. So you can take and just make your own line if you want to. You don't necessarily have to follow that normal cut line you had drawn, okay? You'll do that all the way around the whole body, and you're going to have it all wiped off. That's going to be your single cut line. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how we go back, and we're going to cut that second parallel line, okay? This is where it gets tricky. You can kind of see all of the lines that have been cut out on it. Okay, there's your flame. Now, I'm going to go back, and I'm going to freehand a second cut line right parallel to those lines. Now, here's what I was saying. If you don't have that steady of a hand, you can take and you can overshoot the ends of your design where you can have the front part of the flame have a little bit more of a bubble look to it. Or like I said, we're doing it now. Here is the kind of the difficult part where you're having a line that's exactly parallel to it. So I'll kind of show you how we do it. And you can start at the same areas you want. And you're basically going to go along to it, and you're going to use the back side of that blade as kind of a reference point for cutting. So you can kind of see, we just kind of rotate it, and you kind of, the blade itself, because of the number 16, it's going to want to stick and hold that straight line for you, where you have to rotate the blade handle in your hand to get where you want. And a lot of things that you'll learn too as you're doing it is shallow breathing, because you're balancing the body, you know, maybe up against your chest or your arm. If you're talking or if you're kind of shaky with it, it's not as easy to do. But you want to use shallow breathing in any kind of way you can to prevent it from shaking. So we're drawing these pretty tight. And the idea that you want to try to do is get the line pretty much as parallel as the first line that we cut. So I'll walk these on around, and then I'll kind of show you what it looks like when we pull them off. And you can also go back and change the line itself if you have to make it up, to get it to look however you want. So like I mentioned, if you have a difficult time getting it back in that spot, make sure that you always do your radiuses on the opposite side. Go all the way through. And I'll cut this right here just to pull it off. So when we start pulling the mask off, I'll show you what it's going to look like. When you're pulling mask too, I think a lot of times people pull it the wrong way. So if you have mask, liquid mask that's on it, like for example, what I'm going to show right here, hopefully you can catch it, is we'll take it and we'll pull it away and then carry it out the back side of the flame. You don't want to start back at the back part of the flame and pulling it because you're gonna, chances are you're gonna end up lifting the edge of those flames. So kind of show you here how we're doing this one. Okay, that's how we pull it off. This is what the flames are looking like. Okay, you can see there's pretty parallel throughout the whole thing. And you're going to do that all the way on the whole body. This thinnest line that we pulled off is going to be the first thing that we're going to paint when we go down there. Okay. Hopefully that's going to help you on the tight radiuses. When you just try to do the radius, make sure that if you can't get the blade back in your initial cut line, try to go around the radius first before you lift, and then rotate the body to where you can draw the other cuts back to you. It takes a steady hand. It takes a lot of practice. It's not easy to do, so don't get discouraged. If you do the flame like with this many, flame tips to it, keep in mind it's going to take a lot of patience and time to get to it to do it. You may want to consider, going the larger style flame at first to get the hang of it. So hopefully that will help you out. I'm not sure if we got all of those cuts in there to where you could see them. I'll go back and review the video here and see if we can see what we're looking for. So hopefully it'll help you. I'm going to cut now, and we're going to go and I will do another quick video on how to do the window trim on it. So if you want to catch that one out, it'll be up here right shortly. Let me know if there's more detail or more information you'd like to see on this particular video for cutting the flames out. So I appreciate you guys again. Make sure that you like and subscribe to the page, and we'll keep these videos coming. Catch you on the next one. Bye.